Welcome back. In this lecture, we'll learn casting. Casting is used to specify a data type to a variable and can be done using constructors. And we'll cover the following topics: integers casting using int constructor, floats casting using float constructor, strings casting using string constructor. Now let's see the demo. Go to our IDE, PyCharm, go to our project practice, new Python file, and let's name the file as casting demo, and let's add the comment Python casting demo, that is specifying a data type to a variable. Now let's start with integers casting by using int constructor. Now let's create a integer variable int num1 equals to as the value inside a int constructor. So that way we are specifying data type to the variable int num1 and the data type is integer. Now let's try to print this int num1. Control S to save the file, right click and run casting demo. Now you can see the value 8. So now let's create another integer variable, and for the int constructor let's pass floating point number, this time 8.8. Control S and run the file. Let's print this as well so we can see the value of int num2 in the console. Now you can see it is 8. Even though we passed float value, we see the value of int num2 is 8 because we are specifying integer data type for this variable. So that's the reason you are seeing integer number in the console for the variable int num2. Now let's pass string value, this time 8. Now let's try to print int num3. So you can still see, even though you passed a string value to int constructor, you can see the value, it is integer 8. So let me add the comment integers, so you can see the output is for the integers casting. Now let's see the floats casting using float constructor. So let's create a floating point variable float num1 and pass the value to the float constructor. Let's say we passed an integer value, and let's print floats this time and print the value float num1 and run it. Now you can see the output 3.0. Even though you passed an integer value to float constructor, it is converted to a floating point number 3.0. Now let me create one more floating point variable and pass 3.3 this time and try to print this variable and run it. Now you can see the value 3.3. So now let's create one more variable and this time pass a string value to it, and let's try to print this variable. Now you can see, even though you passed a string value to float constructor, it is converted to float data type. Okay, now let's see how we can do strings casting using string constructor. So let me create a string variable and pass string value to string constructor, and let's try to print the variable string1. We are seeing strings demo now, and let's try to print the variable that we created and run the file. Now you can see for the strings, the output Python is printed in the console. Now let's try to create second variable, and this time let's pass a integer value and let's try to print the variable string2 and see the output in the console. It is 4. It is a string 4. Now if you wanted to see the data type of the variable string2, we have a function called type, and you can see it is of class string. Okay, now let me create another variable and pass floating point number to string constructor, and now let's try to print this variable string3, and you can see the value 4.4. So that's about the casting. that is specifying a data type to a variable by using int constructor, float constructor, and string constructor. In the next lecture, we'll learn more about strings. Alright, see you in the next lecture.